Hey everybody, it's Dean Jackson. Welcome to World Headquarters here in Winter Haven, Florida for the More Cheese, Less Whiskers podcast. And today we've got a very special guest. I'm very excited about this because I don't know how many we've had some people with cool names, but we've never had a Tobin, Jarrett, Poppenberg on the show. And I'm very excited about that. I want to unpack the name and find out everything about Tobin here. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you. Look exactly like you would expect a Tobin, Jarrett, Poppenberg.
That's right. First of his name.
Okay, perfect. So what's the Tobin story here? Where are you from and what are we going to focus on today?
Yeah, well, I grew up all over California, especially on the Central Coast in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara.
Beautiful.
Yeah, gorgeous. And then I went to college in Humboldt County in the Redwoods. And I actually fell into the world of marketing automation when I was in my 20s. I had just graduated from Humboldt State University with my degree in studio photography. And I thought I was going to move to San Francisco and hang a shingle out. And then the clients would just be fighting each other through the door. And that did not happen in any way. And so while I was living before college in Santa Barbara, I had made a really great friend by the name of Landon Ray. And he, when I was lamenting the fact that I couldn't get my wedding photography business off the ground, he said, well, you should move back down to Santa Barbara and answer the phones for my new marketing software company. It's called Office Autopilot. It would wind up becoming Entreport.
Yeah.
And so I wound up joining forces with him and was the third member on the founding team over there.
Wow.
With the first two developers and helped hire and train the first employees and wrote all the instruction manuals and figured out how to use the software so I could train our clients. And then I left Entreport back in I started in 07 and then I left in 14. And I've been consulting with Entreport clients and I have a digital program and I really help small businesses, especially coaches and consultants, to put systems in place to grow their list and make better offers and, automate fulfillment and delight and all like that, get more referrals, but bringing humanity into it, and especially for folks that are out there trying to make a difference so that I can kind of have an impact through osmosis like that. But over the last several years, actually while I was in college, I listened to Jim Dale perform the Harry Potter series.
Okay.
I had a very tedious task that required my full visual attention, but I could let my mind wander. And so I discovered the miracle of audiobooks, and I fell in love with being told a story versus just reading a book. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is well before I had kids, but I thought if I could do that, I would be like in heaven. And then a couple of years later, I had the opportunity I have a nephew that I really love, but from whom I lived very far away. And I didn't ever see him. He was 8 years old. He didn't like to be on the phone, as 8-year-olds are, disinclined that way, but he loved to be read to. So I just started picking up the phone and reading Harry Potter to him. And then, fast forward all these years later, I had, got married and had kids of my own. And evening story time has always been the most incredible time of my day, because I get to do all the voices and really bring these stories to life with the full emotion and like that. But I've always really struggled with, how do I make this a money getting thing? And because if you want to compete in the systems that have been created, for audiobook performers to do their craft, it's not a great system. And my other career pays a lot more. So I've never been able to justify even trying to do the sort of, as Dan Kennedy says, that sort of singles dance, pick me kind of. And that's what the system really is. So Jeff Bezos set up an aspect of Audible, I think it's called SPX or PX. And it's a brokerage that pairs authors, together with audio book performers, voice over artists, so that they can, make deals and it's either full royalties and no upfront pay, or all upfront pay and no royalties, or a blend of the two.
Right. Okay.
But at the end of the day, what you wind up doing is, 9 out of 10, or maybe 99 out of 100 of these voice actors will go out there and do their rehearsals and audition for these books, and they'll get picked, and only this number of copies that are in the author's family will ever get sold.
Yeah.
And then you wind up doing all that work, sweating in a hot studio and having to do your own edit, unless you're Claire Danes, right? Or you're some other Hollywood star who has the cachet to warrant a professional director and editor. Otherwise, you are your own director, your own editor, and you're the talent. And after you put in all that time, it's like you're making minimum wage, and there's no way that I can do that. So that's what's really stopped me from competing, again, within the systems that have been set up for this industry. But a wise friend visited me a few weeks ago, and he said, Tobin, I invited him to come and lay down at the foot of my kid's bed and just listen, because he got there before his wife did. And afterward, he took me aside and he grabbed me by the shirt collar, and he said, Tobin, I had no idea that you could do that. I mean, I am a 53-year-old man with no kids. I never would have read that book. And now I'm all invested in the characters. I want to know what's coming next. I feel like I know each one of them. You completely brought this thing to life, and you have to get that out. You have to share that with other people. And so I thought, okay, this is it. I cannot no longer do this, And so we went downstairs and we had this brainstorm. And of course, we came up against the incredible might of the legal departments at publishing houses, right? They own the intellectual property, the rights to the intellectual property for these works of art. And you can't just read books that are copyrighted on a podcast. So, and again, I've come up against that objection just internally as well as I've considered this.
I wonder, is it any different? Is there no mechanism set up similar to doing cover songs? Is there no way that, if you're a band or a singer and you perform, you record a cover of somebody's song, there's a statutory royalty that you pay, but they're almost always cleared. And it's an interesting dynamic. I wonder if there's anything set up like that with audio books.
Yeah. Well, in my research, and I did some good old-fashioned Googling, and I brought AI into it as well. What I have discovered is that they would not like me to be doing it just one-to-one, and I'm likely to get either cease and desist or worse. But there are a couple of avenues that do create sort of similar provisions, but not one-to-one with the cover scenario. The first one is I can just choose to perform works that are already in the public domain and no longer covered by copyright.
I was just going to wonder about that. And I'm sure there's a lot of the classics are like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Winnie the Pooh, all the Winnie the Pooh are in there. And that's incidentally what we've started with. And then there is the Fair Use Act, where if I add more than just the straight reading of the text, hey, stay tuned. We're going to discuss some of the vocab words, and we're going to have a discussion about what the themes that the author was trying to convey within tonight's reading. And then the other piece is, right, it's the time piece, right? So my friend said, yeah, it takes a long time, but you're already doing it every night. You already go in there and read them. You just strap a hell mic on there, and then, you just position it as this is the pure transmission during actual story time in our home, right? And that's almost and position it like a feature, not a bug. So there's the little exchanges for my kids and them asking questions and a little off the topic, joke, and maybe one of the kids, toots. I mean, it's and that's why it's not.
Either way. Yeah.
Well, hey, look, I might feel a little bit bad
on the kids, right? That's funny.
So that's really where we're headed with this. I've got a little website created, and I've got the trailer created, and I'm really excited and inspired. And the goal is create enough of a groundswell of listenership, excitement, enthusiasm with these works that are already in the public domain, such that I get noticed by publishers and authors, and they become willing to or even approach me about, hey, can we have our author featured on Storytime with Tobin? And then maybe you can do an interview afterward and share where your audience can find her other work.
Right.
Right. So now it's collaboration, not competition.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, are you going to do it by video or audio?
Well, that's the trouble is, in a highly visual world, right? We're on a podcast right now, but, we're both on screen as well. As a marketer, I think, reels are really amazing for creating reach. But there's something that is really pure about an audio only experience. And part of the positioning is, look, in this world of hyper, screen time media round the clock, as parents, we really struggle to find entertainment that is screen free. And storytelling, it really is an auditory experience. And so I don't want to muddle that with getting visuals involved.
Yeah, that's great. So there's certainly, then you're taking it picking a lane, right? And having I really do like this idea of taking the public domain ones or known things and building an audience that way. But then there's also the opportunity, just like you said, to now introduce once you build that audience, that reach is the asset, right? That's what's really valuable, is being able to, now you've got, thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of listeners, an audience of that now becomes, just like you said, they're going to be pursuing you to perform their new book or to do, and to introduce them. It becomes you can become a curator of new stuff, introduce things to people. Yeah. But it's certainly about building that audience, Yeah. Exactly. And there's so many, kids stuff is just, there's so much reach for that. You look at these, we had a friend, I remember this, I always bring it up to him because have you ever seen on YouTube, Ryan's Toys? It's one of the most popular YouTube channels. They do about, $5 million a month now on YouTube. And I've got a friend here in Winter Haven. He adopted two boys, and we came up with the idea of a toy review podcast before Ryan did the thing. We had the logo and everything done up, and the idea was, we'd take the boys to Toys R Us. We'd let them run and pick one toy, and then we'd come back and they would unbox it, play with it, and then they would give the review. And the thing was, you buy toy now, as the of the thing. And that was going to be the format. And for whatever reason, his wife wasn't thrilled about the idea of the kids doing that stuff like that, so we ended up not doing it. But then Ryan's Toys came in, and it was a, big hit. When I first saw that they had done, $3 million in the first, in a year that they had done, and now they're, huge numbers. And you see so many kids, some of the biggest YouTube channels that you've never really heard of are kids related, So it's crazy. So there is that. I think you're right on track, and you're passionate about it, and it's unique in a way that what is the landscape of people doing this type of podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't want to come off as being any kind of way, but it's not great. What's out there is, it's great for me, but it's like, it's people who don't have the talent and have not cultivated the skills at embodying the character, and really bringing the characters to life and telling these stories in an engaging way. And I do know there's a preschool or kindergarten teacher out there with a story time kind of podcast And this is why I know that there's not like a provision for cover works that would protect us from that kind of use. But he was reading Magic Treehouse books, and the author ceased and desisted him. But it's mostly just people reading kind of just like they normally read, and kind of like cheesy, hokey voices, like you'd expect in like a preschool or kindergarten class. And it's just like, it's not what I would reach for. Like, there's not a solution to the problem other than, of course, paid Audible, and like that. There's not like a podcast that does it for me in terms of when I'm reaching for, hey, I'm in a road trip with my kids. Hey, I want to put something on that isn't going to be flooding them with visual stimulus and advertising to them, right? There's nothing available like that. So that's why it's a little weird. Like, I'm almost like first in, like in the category here. It feels kind of ripe.
I wonder, that children's book category seems like there's a huge number of people that want to get into that world, in that, self-publishing on Amazon and independent publishing of children's books, that there may be a whole audience of people who would love to, partner with you in a way that you almost become development, on their way to getting a publishing deal, or on their way to getting, you could almost be like, I'm just thinking out loud, right? Because it's the first time I've thought about this kind of thing, but this is what these discussions are valuable for, is what if you kind of positioned yourself as an A&R kind of, an artist and repertoire kind of talent scout, that you look for all of the books that have promise, that you could bring them to life. Your performance of the book would make a otherwise kind of lost in the sea of endless children's books that, like you said, even if people do the audiobook, they get out there, but it's only their family that gets the books. There's no discovery mechanism for choosing the children's books over there. So maybe being you discovering this children's, you could be the Elton John to somebody's Bernie Taupin, that somebody's writing these children's books and you're bringing them to life through your readings, and you can tell, the stories, or it's a pretty interesting model. I'm here, the studio I'm at right here, Juan, guys producing the show there, they've just written a children's book and illustrated, and are in the process of getting it up. But I mean, it's so you see that there's so many, it's a thing, that might be a really interesting way of kind of building that audience, but initially you need that reach. And that's what building it through a podcast per se is a little, the podcast is not a great lead generator, right? A podcast is a much better lead conversion tool and audience building, audience nurturing tool, that you get to know people kind of thing. But it's usual that it's not, especially now because there are so many podcasts, that even podcast discovery is a little bit, more difficult. So I always look at, if you're going to do a podcast, I say to people, and you certainly want to monetize it, it's not going to be a situation where you put up the podcast and then all of a sudden everybody's going to find you. You still have to go out and find the audience,
Yes.
Yeah. Unless you're doing it on YouTube, which is a search engine, essentially, that you can build, I think that's the way you can build an audience on YouTube in a way that you can't build an audience on iTunes or Spotify, in that people are constantly searching for things.
Love that. So a couple of things I want to speak to there. This idea around building an audience. It's so funny. I'm old enough that I actually had Frank Kern's mass control product when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the distinctions that I think he invented was this answer method. Remember that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So it was like, go in and, like make friends, make nice in groups, communities where your audience is, and then answer people's questions and be an authority.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't be a dick and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, we're looking at converting that strategy into, and the thing is so beautiful because there's nothing to buy here.
Right.
So there's nothing to buy yet. Right now, what there is to just get to know it and listen and get yourself interested in coming back for more and like that, because that creates a sort of a workaround from the sort of no self-promotion, no pitching that is now standard. It's like, hey, there's nothing to buy here. Just go listen to my podcast and you can have something wholesome for your family and your kids to listen to. And then, so, there are in every city and every county, there are 10 different parent groups, parents of Asheville, parents of Orlando. And it's like, some of them have really incredible engagement, right?
Yes.
So part of the strategy is going to be like, hey, do you struggle to find wholesome screen-free stuff for your kids? Like I did too. And that's why I created this. And you can go and listen for free and love it. And, leave us a review if you want. And like that. So that's one of the strategies that we're going to use to spread the word. And if we find that we're still flagging the no self-promotion rule, which you got to be a special kind of,
Karen. Yeah.
Yeah. In order to shut somebody down for that kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
Then we'll have other people do it. Like, oh my gosh, love this podcast I just got turned on to, and you have to listen to it too. So it's not self-promotion. It's just somebody spreading the word about this amazing. So I'd love to get your take on sort of branching off of that, because that sort of it accomplishes the same goal, and perhaps with greater efficacy, because it's just in the perception of other members of the audience, never mind the admins who are in there trying to reinforce the rules and see who's breaking them and like have that whole ego experience of whatever. But also just when social proof comes from truly not the creator and the person who stands to benefit, it tends to have more weight.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what makes it social proof instead of just, a sales page.
Right, exactly.
So I'd love to, if anything comes to mind about that, how to sort of do it better or with a greater sense of authenticity, or a greater chance of it, sort of seeping through and doing its work.
Yeah, part of the thing of doing that is making them great, is that they really are good. That builds its own legs and own momentum. That's something that people remark about things that are remarkable. And that's kind of what we want to do. But it sounds like what you're doing is pretty remarkable in terms of the feedback that you've gotten and the way, and you tell you're passionate about it. And so building that audience, where is it at right now? You've got it's not up into the world yet, or have you recorded?
Only a first edition of the trailer, which is admittedly on. Listening a few times, it's long-winded. We need to get the axe out and trim about a minute or two off it. So you could listen to a trailer, but I'm not telling people about it because I want to have a few episodes up before I ring the bell.
Yeah. And how many stories are there that you could tell? Like, what would be your publishing calendar? Because all these contextual things are really what you need to figure out. Is this going to be, is it a weekly thing? Is it a daily thing? Is it, how is it serialized? Are you reading, like, is each episode a complete book that you're reading? And what kind of books are they? What age are they? Children's books? Because you mentioned like Harry Potter, that's a long thing, but Winnie the Pooh is like the, picture turning pages.
Yeah.
What's the vision for?
Totally. Yeah. So some very short stories occasionally may finish in a single episode, but I read for between 20 and 40 minutes in a session. And that's mostly good for like a chapter or a section of a book. So it could take anywhere from, 2 or 3 episodes, right? And that a given chapter is an episode. And so it's not quite like, it's sort of a hybrid of serial or an episodic, because it's chunks, like a few 3 to 5 or 10 episodes make up a book, which is a complete package.
Yeah.
And that'll be clearly labeled. And also in the description, it'll say, we're reading this, it's this chapter of this book.
Yeah.
Go back and start at the beginning of
part
the book.
Part 1 of 6 or part 1 of 4. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then the cadence releases, I aim for 3 per week.
That's
once I've got kind of a groove to where, like, there's some stuff to dive into and a listener could actually get their feet wet and really experience and get a sense of it.
So that's fantastic. So then you start to think this is a reach issue, right? Like, so you've got the capability to create them. You can record and you can produce the actual episodes. That's one thing, right? So now you're building that asset that in a year you'll have 150 of these, which is a nice footprint, right? But you're not. Yeah. And so then it becomes the number one thing is about reach of who is this going to. So, I think you'll build some organic reach just by being on Spotify and iTunes and some of those. And if there's a way to kind of orchestrate getting grassroots kind of things, like you said, like getting in these groups on Facebook and building that distribution, kind of the street team to get the word out about the podcast. But once you build that kind of audience there, then you start to think, who would be a good sponsor for something like this? Like you think back to when I was growing up, we had Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom was like a show that came on before The Wonderful World of Disney, which was also a sponsored show, And so you start to think, who would want to be in front of that group of people? Like, what kind of audience are you building? Who else would be interested in that audience? And how could you align in a way that this becomes a great thing for them? And maybe there's one sponsor, maybe there's one, company that you're kind of aligned with that philosophically gels with that. If you think about the big picture of it, that they want to get in front of that audience. And maybe there's, or maybe it is a publisher who wants to get their book featured on that you now become, it's not of like, hey, stop reading our stuff, to, hey, will you read our book? I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that you find the ones that are looking, that would view it as a good thing.
Exactly.
You got almost like what a great like market research tool in a way too, right? Like if you think about the way of gauging the response or the reception to this particular story, that you can create some, almost curating or discovering new people. That could be a neat way. There's lots of opportunity when you kind of look at the through line of this, that 3 times a week we're putting out a kid's, audio. It's going to be, books that are, what's the sort of philosophy that you're trying to curate here? Or is there a meaning or a message, or is it, inspiring kids? Is it educating kids? Is it empowering kids? What are the kind of values of the content that you're creating?
Love that. Yeah, so it really is about inspiring kids, cultivating that love of literature, of stories, of creativity itself. Also, I'm going to be talking about, my own journey just in snippets and snatches. And really my journey is very much the journey that many people can relate to around really suppressing the creative urge. I mean, to be fair, I have been actually doing the limited audience of just my kids all these years.
Mm-hmm.
But be that as it may, suppressing the creative instinct to share it for so long and feeling that sense of being stifled and then having the experience of now sharing it is in itself, right, a sort of bit of that, as Elizabeth Gilbert would say, that big magic, right? Just like living this life of creativity that is beyond fear. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of a thing, but there's the opportunity, I think, that's the big picture of it, but you can also kind of frame it in a way that it's pointed in a direction that could turn into something. And like give yourself the best chance for that. Because if you look at it that what is the kind of way, well, what would be your monetization goal for it? If you said, like, is it just something that you want to do as a fun side thing, or do you see it as something that you could build into your primary livelihood type of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the truth is, I actually don't really know what is possible in this arena. I know that what most audiobook narrators make is not interesting to me.
Right.
And that's why this whole other avenue where there can be these other, deals, and there's also just, listenership engagement paychecks that the different platforms are cutting to people. And you mentioned YouTube as a place where audience can get cultivated. I intend to have episodes be there as well with just, some screen animation on there as the visual, since it is an audio only thing. But the truth is, I don't have any frame of reference, but just to be clear, I would very much love to have this take over the next, 1 to 3 years as my primary way of generating my livelihood. And like anybody, I want to be wealthy and like have nice things and all that.
Yeah. And so I think part of it is that the real way to that is going to be by having the audience. That's the most valuable thing that you could do, is create this audience of very specific targeted group, right? So what age is the sweet spot for what you're kind of looking at here?
Well, it's interesting because I like reading books that are a little older just for my own personal enjoyment.
Yeah.
But then there is a little bit of like, well, Winnie the Pooh, even though it does have a weirdly broad appeal, like my 12-year-old daughter is still able to get down with it, and 4-year-olds can get down with it.
That's what it kind of feels like. The 4 to 10 kind of range is who you're talking about, right?
Yeah, or maybe even 5 to 10. But it's better if they start listening earlier and stay later.
So what would that? So I wonder if you think about that, is like how many 5 to 10-year-old kids are there? Millions, I'm always curious about that, because I know this is like the biggest generation, right? There's 10,000 people a day turning 65 right now in America, Hey Siri, how many people are aged 5 to 10 in the United States right now?
Found.
Number of children by age 0 to 5, 22 million. 6 to 11, there's 24.5 million. 24 million people. It's a pretty good size audience, right?
Hey, I would say. And then there's also the rest of the English-speaking world.
Exactly. That's just what should probably, maybe double or triple that number of there. Yeah. So maybe there's 100 million. Yeah. And that's pretty interesting. But to have an audience of, even 100,000 of those is a very valuable thing. Yeah.
Totally.
So I think that part of it is the core of it has to be able to be doing it even. And that's why it's something where the passion comes into it, that your kids, how old are your kids?
They're actually aging rapidly out of my art. That's why I feel a certain sense of urgency to get, and it's worth mentioning, they're 9 and 12 right now.
Okay.
And so I'm sort of kicking myself for not starting this 5 years ago, but, best time to plant an apple tree. second best time is today.
Mm-hmm.
So my sense is like I got a year or two to really lay down some episodes, get an audience so that I can transition to actually just reading in their absence. And it will change things, but look, things change.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's the thing, that maybe every third episode is without them. So you're all along, it's normal that you're doing one without them.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. Yeah, normalizing it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then that also frees me up if I go on a trip and I'm not with them. Yeah. And the other thing too is, early on in my career, I was fortunate enough to have Adrian of Yoga with Adrian as a client. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're hip to that, but they dominate the online yoga space. They have a video on demand business that is amazing, huge, and really sweet people. And the guy called Chris Sharp is the sort of business end of that business, and Adrian Miller is the talent. And Chris, what was that thread I was on? I can't remember. What were you on about before? I
was saying normalizing making episodes, every third episode without the kids.
Now I remember.
Yeah.
So, it started out as just doing free yoga videos and putting them on YouTube. And then all of a sudden she had millions and millions of subscribers.
Yeah.
And she had this amazing audience. And it was like, hey, maybe we should do like a 12-city tour where I go and teach yoga like at the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium in San Francisco to 10,000 people in the room.
Yeah.
It's like, what about that? And it's like, maybe it's not the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium. Maybe it's like the New York, City Library, and it's, 100 kids or 1,000 kids maybe.
Right. That's the whole point. And then wonder if, I just had an idea of maybe one element of it to get sort of a live thing is to do the recording on Clubhouse or something where people can listen in. Like if you do a story time, if you're doing some episodes without the kids, that maybe you just do it live where you're recording, but it's on Clubhouse and people can listen in at or whatever, That's an interesting, I just did a series. Like Clubhouse has kind of changed and evolved as a medium. They've really figured out the audio, an intimate form of gathering in the audience. But, being able to, do that and then maybe even shout out people or whatever, where there feels like they're on there, there's a pretty interesting thing. I just did a series for real estate where I did 5 clubhouses in a row at noon, where I did every, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, a different topic for those 5 days. And it had, people come on live, but I recorded them as podcasts because you get the recording of it. And so I recorded them for the purpose of using it as a podcast, but also to transcribe and turn into a book, And so I look at that as, I think the core really has to be, I always love watching Mr. Beast kind of unpack what his secret sauce is. And he says their number one focus always is just make the best videos possible. That's the whole thing. That's his single-minded thing, is just make great videos. And I think it would translate to that, just record great podcasts, There's something to that. Now, you can't that's not to say in any way that's just enough, that you've now also got to think about how to gather the audience and get the word out there and do it with an eye to, in 2 years or 3 years, what does this look like when you've got 100,000 or more listeners and you are now a known thing, that it would be great for you to be able to break a new book or to introduce a new, a favorite thing that people, I don't think content is going to be a problem for you. Like if you just look right now, if you just looked on Amazon or Kindle or where, Amazon, I guess, is where people go to publish all the independent kids book. I think you could see who's independently published and think about ways to feature those where now, like you're saying, you're not asking for permission. It's a benefit, an honor for them to get featured on, to read their book.
Yeah. Interesting. Of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the sort of pay to play model where, content creators or people with a developing platform pay to be on a podcast.
Yeah.
So that is another sort of monetization strategy where it's like, cool, if you're not like one of my favorite authors or you're not already established, it's $1,000. I'll read your story or part of it. I'll do an interview with you. And then you're exposed to 100,000 people instantly.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, 1,000, 5,000, whatever the package is,
right,
like that.
Yeah.
And then another idea that I had was, you're familiar with Patreon?
Yes.
Yeah. So similar to this idea of Clubhouse, but like, hey, free folks get this. Yeah. And then if you give $1 or $5 a month, whatever it is, then you get access to these other cool things. And PS, you're entered into the monthly, if you're an aspiring and
I would do whatever I could to build an email list of subscribers, which is so much more valuable than just this ethereal podcast subscribers or people that are regular listeners, because you can't really control that. It's so much better to always have something that there's a reason that they'll subscribe by email.
Yeah. Great reminder.
Something.
Yeah. And I mean, they're like put it in the outro, like,
yeah, always.
I guess it is. Yeah. I guess it is.
Yeah, for sure. Always. And so you start to think about, what could you do? Could that be like where it becomes a curator of and reviewer of, books, and then you select things. I mean, what's very interesting, the thing that most people don't really understand about what Reese Witherspoon just did was she built her Reese's book club, modeling simply Oprah's book club. So she built her thing, and she would go and, she'd find authors, like find books that she really liked. She would go and feature them in her book club. And the data that she got on that was what books are getting traction. And she would option the right to make the movies of those books. And so she was using it as a feeder thing to create what market research tells her are stories that people want to hear. And then she'd make the movie and they'd be big hits. And she just sold her Sunshine production studio for $900 million. And that's, but it was so amazing because we saw a documentary that was, I think, called like The Time Is Now or something like that. But it was all these angry Hollywood women directors who were, talking about the patriarchy and how they actually tried to sue the studio system for showing favoritism to men and, all their sexist practices. And they would meet at one of these ladies' houses every Saturday for a year to build their case and try and, sue the studio system. But then Reese Witherspoon was on the documentary, and she said, I went to all the studio heads and sat down with them and said, hey, have you got anything for me? Or what have you got in development? And she said she was shocked at how little content was being developed that was for, strong, empowered women characters kind of thing. So instead of getting mad at the system and trying to sue the patriarchy to get what they're entitled to, she said, so my partner and I decided we'll start a production company and we'll make these kind of movies that I wanted to and see. So she went out and did something about it and created this whole thing. And now she just sold for $900 million, Mm-hmm. And it's just such a, rather than trying to fight the system, there's nobody holding anybody back from any of those other women could have done exactly what Reese did. but they were so busy trying to fight the patriarchy about it and try and fight that it's not fair the way things are done. And I think that there's a way you could almost become that, you become that voice for people, that trusted curator of an introducer of great children's content,
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I really love this, the framing up of, and that's one of the things I love about you is just the way that your mind works around how do we create a game that we can win.
Right, exactly.
Right? Instead of fighting up against, banging our heads up against the systems that are not created in order to have the result that we want.
Yeah.
Well, we're just going to go out, and it's like, we don't often think about this, like be the change you want to see in the world in through that lens. Right. But it sort of is like that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, I'm just going to go out and do this. Yeah. And there's nothing to stop me. And it sounds like fun.
Yeah. And that's kind of the cool thing, because then when you're looking at it, that now you're not just even about books, that it could be that you could feature music and feature all the things that, now that you've got that audience of these people, then now you've got the things that, you could do. Look at the Daily Wire right now in the last year, everything that they've done with, did you follow the story about Harry's razors? That the Daily Wire had Harry's razors were like a huge advertiser in Daily Wire podcasts and website. And then one day, one of the Daily Wire, show hosts said something that Harry's didn't buy into. Like they were talking about men are men and women are women or something like that, talking about gender identity. And Harry's said, in a woke moment, canceled them. They basically canceled the Daily Wire. We're not doing any more advertising. And so Jeremy Boringer, the president of the Daily Wire, said, okay, well, rather than replace the advertiser, who we're going to be always at the mercy of advertisers who might not like what we say, like almost like surprise, some conservative on a conservative platform said something conservative. That's kind of, you get canceled for it. They said, well, instead of replacing the advertiser, let's just make the razors. And he started Jeremy's Razors. And now they have this super successful subscription razor business for men. That's really the thing that they're doing. And they did the same thing with Hershey. Hershey canceled them as well. And they opened up, they have 2 chocolate bars that they sell now. And so it's amazing once you have that audience built that you've got such a huge platform there, building that audience is really where it comes down to. I think now that I think about it, how Ben Shapiro, how they started the Daily Wire was, they really got venture funding, told the story of going into the meeting and just drawing on a napkin, basically showing $ money, and then drawing an arrow to Facebook, and then drawing an arrow from Facebook to the website, and then from the website back to the $. He said, that's the business model. We're going to take money. We're going to run ads on Facebook, driving people to the website. We're going to build our audience. We're going to take the money and we're going to put it back into Facebook, and we're going to create a never-ending money machine, which is exactly what they've done. A $200 million a year business now.
Wow.
Yeah. So just simple models. Like, I think you're onto something there. The desire, people have been reading to their kids from the beginning of time. It's not going away. It's not getting old.
Yeah.
5 to 10-year-olds are still, they're always going to want to hear stories,
Totally. And the problem is a lot of parents are tired at the end of the day, and, they want to be doing it, or maybe they're like, they can't muster the gumption to put the effort into the different voices, or they feel embarrassed, or it's just too much work, or sometimes they just want to lay there and snuggle with their kid and be entertained right along with them.
Yeah,
but not be staring at a bunch of blue light.
Right. That's super smart.
Just all the different narrative positioning. Yeah. It's like, hey, as a parent myself, I get all of these angles, except for not the one where I feel embarrassed to read in different characters.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you really got something there. I mean, it's you could see it finished. I can imagine it, right? Imagine that if this did exist, you can see, and there's other kids' platforms that have millions of audience, you know?
Huge.
It's the most reliable. Yeah. I love that. Well, what's your takeaway here? What's the takeaway from?
Well, just first of all, the reinforcement of the greatest challenge before me is reach, is cultivating that reach. The idea of developing the values-based philosophical almost positioning of the show, and that guides our curation so that parents can know on a deeper level what they're exposing their kids to on, and what they can lean into and expect from that beyond just merely entertainment. Yeah. And just this idea of positioning myself in the show as almost like an A&R, where that's a whole other way. It's like, hey, you're up and coming. I'm going to expose you to my audience, and this is the fee, and this is one other way that we monetize here.
Or you become the publisher. In a lot of that's really the next evolution, is that you're publishing the content, right? Yeah.
And then the idea of that I love hearing, because I didn't know this, that Spotify and other podcast platforms are not great for the actual cultivation of the audience. And so that really reminds me, every episode has to get put out on YouTube as well. Yeah. And then just this idea of make it great. You know, that would seem self-evident, but you know, it's important to have that as a reminder, because it can feel tempting when you're tired and there's a million steps to, you know, just phone it in. And that shit will never do. You know, might do here and there, but it's not any kind of foundation I want to build this thing on. So, yeah, and then there's this idea of training the audience to expect that sometimes it will just be me reading.
Right.
It will not be. So that then I can begin to sort of wean off of that as my kids age out of the desire to have their daddy read to them.
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe as they get older, maybe they will do some of the reading.
Hello.
You know, I mean, maybe they get bitten by that bug too. They trained under the master.
Sometimes I'll, just as an experiment to see if everybody's still paying attention, I will just start reading in my just regular old voice for the characters. And, you know, my kids will go, Daddy, do it normal when I do that.
That's funny. Right. That's funny. Because they're like, that's not that character. Right.
That's not normal. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You're ruining it, Daddy.
Yeah. I love it. Well, if people are listening and they want to kind of follow that journey and watch it all happen here, knowing that we kind of birthed it right here, where can people go to check it out?
Cool. Well, you can go to storytimewithtobin.com.
Okay.
And there you'll find links to all the different podcast platforms. You can listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And then you can also subscribe. You can join the email list and never miss an episode. And obviously I'll be, you know, after this conversation, I'll also be figuring out cool stuff to give away, you know, for the folks on the list. And just reach out. Right now, I don't even have, it's still in the works. So I don't even have an autoresponder that says, hey, welcome to Storytime with Tobin. It's just, but that'll be coming. But I would love to hear from you. If you have ideas or you got kids and you want to listen, or if you have